Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into one of the most chaotic, violent, and morally bewildering books in the entire biblical canon, the Book of Judges. Imagine for a moment you're not sitting comfortably in your home. Instead, you're on a dusty, sun-scorched hillside in the ancient land of Canaan, maybe 3,000 years ago. There's no king, no police force, no federal government. The nearest thing you have to law is the elder at the village gate, and the nearest thing you have to protection is how fast you and your family can run to the local stronghold when the riders appear on the horizon. Smoke stains the sky from a neighboring village that wasn't fast enough. Your world is a patchwork of feuding tribes, opportunistic warlords, and foreign oppressors who see your land, your crops, and your children as theirs for the taking. This isn't a story of saints and pristine heroes. This is a chronicle written in blood and dust, a collection of tales about a nation repeatedly hitting rock bottom and the deeply flawed, often terrifying individual's God raises up from the wreckage to save it. In this world, your modern sensibilities about due process and proportional response are a fatal liability. You probably won't survive this, not with your 21st century ethics intact. The heroes here are assassins, zealots, and social outcasts who engage in acts that would land them on every international watch list today. The stories they left behind are the ones Sunday school teachers tend to skip, the ones that make you stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. and wonder about the nature of faith, violence, and divine justice. Our journey begins, as so many stories in Judges do, with a simple, damning phrase. And the children of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. It's a refrain, a grim chorus that echoes through the generations. The peace that had been won is squandered. The memory of deliverance fades. The covenant with their God is treated like a dusty old scroll, unread and irrelevant. And in the theology of this book, that vacuum of faith is never left empty for long. It is immediately filled by oppression. The narrator tells us that because of their evil, the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against them. This is a crucial theological point to grasp before we go any further. The oppressors in Judges are not random antagonists who just happen to win the geopolitical lottery. They are presented as instruments, tools of divine chastisement. God doesn't just allow the wolf to enter the fold, he unlocks the gate, sharpens the wolf's teeth, and points it toward the wayward sheep. It's a harsh, uncomfortable concept. This idea of God actively empowering an enemy to punish his own people. It removes any sense of comfortable distance. The suffering of Israel is not an accident. It is an appointment. So who is this Eglon, king of Moab? To understand the sting of this particular domination, we have to remember who the Moabites were in the Israelite consciousness. They weren't just some random foreign power. They were cousins, in a manner of speaking. According to the book of Genesis, Moab was the son of Lot's eldest daughter, conceived through an incestuous union after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So, there's a tangled, somewhat sordid family history there. territory lay to the east of the Dead Sea, a high plateau in what is modern-day Jordan. They were a constant, nagging presence on Israel's border. For Moab to not just raid, but to conquer and rule over parts of Israel was a profound humiliation. And Eglon doesn't come alone. He forms a coalition, a pocket axis of evil, bringing the Ammonites, descendants of Lot's other daughter, so also cousins, and the Amalekites, perennial, bitter enemies of Israel from the south, along with him. Together, this multinational force strikes at the heart of Israel's foundational story. They capture Jericho, the city of palm trees. This location is dripping with symbolic significance. Jericho was the very first city the Israelites conquered under Joshua when they entered the Promised Land. It was the site of a miraculous victory where the walls came tumbling down, a testament to God's power to deliver the land into their hands. For Eglon to set up his throne, there is a masterful act of psychological warfare. It's like an enemy planting their flag on the rubble of the World Trade Center or holding a victory parade in Red Square. He is not just occupying land, he is desecrating a memory. He is making a statement. Your God gave you this place, and now I rule here. My power is greater than your history, greater than your God's promises. And for 18 long years, this is the reality. 18 years of paying tribute, of handing over the best of their crops, the best of their livestock, to a foreign king. 18 years of seeing the Moabite flag flying over a city that was supposed to be a symbol of their divine inheritance. You can imagine the resentment simmering, the prayers growing more desperate, the question being asked in whispers from one generation to the next. Where is the God who brought us out of Egypt? Where is the God who shattered the walls of this very city? Finally, after nearly 2 decades of grinding servitude, the breaking point is reached. The second part of the cycle kicks in, supplication. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. It is a cry of desperation, the plea of a people with no other options left. And true to the pattern, God responds. And the Lord raised up for them a deliverer. But the deliverer who steps onto the stage is not a gleaming hero in shining armor. He is Ehud, son of Gera, from the tribe of Benjamin. And the text gives us one very specific, very strange detail about him. He is, in the original Hebrew, an ish iter yad yemiano. The most common translation is a left-handed man. But the phrasing is more complex than that. It can literally be translated as a man restricted in his right hand. This has led to endless debate among scholars. Was Ehud simply left-handed, a natural trait? Or was he disabled, perhaps, with a withered or unusable right arm? Both possibilities are fascinating. If he was merely left-handed, it was still a notable trait in a world that was overwhelmingly right-hand dominant. The sword was worn on the left hip for a right-handed draw. A left-handed man would wear it on his right hip. This small detail might make him seem awkward or slightly off to an observer, a deviation from the norm that could be exploited. But the tribe of Benjamin was famous for its left-handed warriors. Later in the book of Judges, we learn that the tribe of Benjamin had 700 chosen men who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hare and not miss. So, being a left-handed Benjamite might not have been a mark of weakness, but a sign of specialized, elite military training. It suggests a warrior trained to be ambidextrous or to fight in ways that would surprise a right-handed opponent. The other possibility, that he was disabled, adds another layer of profound theological weight to the story. It would fit a recurring theme throughout the Bible: God choosing the weak, the overlooked, the physically imperfect to accomplish his greatest victories. Think of Moses, who was slow of speech, or Jacob, who walked with a limp after wrestling with God. If Ehud had a useless right arm, he would be the last person anyone would expect to be a warrior, let alone an assassin. He would be dismissed, underestimated, and allowed into the king's presence precisely because he wasn't perceived as a threat. Either way, whether a specialized warrior or a disabled underdog, his defining physical characteristic is the key to his entire plan. The plan itself is one of brutal, intimate deception. Ehud fashions a weapon, a short sword about a gomed in length, which is roughly a cubit or 18 inches. It's small enough to be concealed, not a greatsword for open battle, but a dagger for close quarters work. And it is double-edged, sharp on both sides, designed for maximum internal damage on the thrust and withdrawal. He straps this dagger to his right thigh, under his clothes. This is the crucial detail. Guards performing a pat-down would almost certainly check a man's left thigh, the conventional place for a right-handed man to carry a weapon. By placing it on his right thigh, Ehud is exploiting the universal expectation of right-handedness. His unique physical trait allows for a unique method of concealment. He then joins the delegation of Israelites sent to deliver the annual tribute to King Eglon. Imagine the scene: a procession of defeated people carrying the fruits of their labor, bowing and scraping before their foreign master. Ehud is just one face in the crowd, another subjugated Israelite. The tribute is presented. The formal, humiliating ceremony concludes, but as the delegation begins its journey home, Ehud has a second act. He accompanies them part of the way to a place called the Sculptured Stones, or Idols at Gilgal. This location is also significant. Gilgal was the first campsite of the Israelites after they crossed the Jordan River. It was where they set up 12 stones to commemorate the miracle. Now, under Moabite rule, it seems the place has been defiled with Moabite idols. It is from this place of corrupted memory that Ehud turns back, alone. He returns to Eglon's palace and with audacious confidence announces, "I have a secret message for you, O king." The phrase secret message, Dabar Setter, carries a weight of intrigue that Eglon cannot resist. Perhaps it's intelligence, an offer to betray his own people for royal favor. Eglon, a man who clearly enjoys the power and paranoia of kingship, commands silence and dismisses all his attendants. The king and the assassin are now alone. The setting is described as a cool roof chamber, his private summer parlor. This would have been an airy room on the upper level of the palace, designed to catch the breeze and offer a respite from the oppressive heat of the Jordan Valley. It was a place of comfort, privacy, and relaxation for the king. It was about to become his tomb. The narrator now slows down, focusing on the details with a cinematographer's eye. Eglon is sitting alone. Ehud approaches him. "I have a message from God for you," he says. The Hebrew word for God here is Elohim. Eglon, likely a worshipper of the Moabite god Chemosh, might have assumed the message was from his own deity. Hearing the word God, he shows a moment of reverence and stands up from his seat. It is a fatal courtesy. In that instant, as the king rises, Ehud, the left-handed man, reaches across his body with his left hand, pulls the concealed dagger from his right thigh, and lunges forward. The description of the assassination is one of the most graphically visceral passages in the entire Bible. Ehud drove the sword into his belly, and the narrator doesn't stop there. And the hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword out of his belly. This is not a clean, surgical strike. It's a brutal, deep, all-consuming thrust. Eglon is described as a very fat man, and now this detail becomes gruesomely relevant. His own decadent flesh, a symbol of his gluttonous oppression of Israel, becomes his undoing. It is so thick that it swallows not just the 18-inch blade, but the hilt as well, making it impossible for Ehud to retrieve his weapon. The king's obesity literally seals his own wound, trapping the instrument of his death inside him. Then comes the final grotesque detail, and the dirt came out. The Hebrew word here is ha-parshadana. Its exact meaning is debated, but the context strongly suggests a release of fecal matter. Some scholars argue it might refer to an opening or a vestibule through which Ehud escaped, but the most straightforward reading points to the king's bowels evacuating upon death. This is not just a random gory detail. It is the ultimate humiliation. The great, powerful, corpulent King Eglon, who sat on a throne in the city of God's first miracle, dies not in a noble battle, but in his private chamber, stabbed with a hidden dagger, with his own fat closing over the wound, and soiling himself in his final moments. It is a calculated piece of narrative propaganda, designed to strip the oppressor of all dignity and portray him as a pathetic, foul creature whose death is as disgusting as his life. Ehud's cunning does not end with the assassination. He needs to escape a palace crawling with guards. He walks out of the chamber, pulls the doors shut behind him, and locks them from the outside. He leaves the dead king sealed in his own private room. Then he calmly walks away. When Eglon's servants return, they find the doors to the roof chamber locked. They wait, and they wait. They reason. Surely he is relieving himself in the cool chamber. The Hebrew is literally covering his feet, a common euphemism for using the toilet. They are so conditioned to the king's privacy and routine that they hesitate to disturb him. Their deference, born of fear and palace etiquette, becomes Ehud's greatest asset. They wait so long that they become embarrassed by their own inaction. Finally, they get a key, open the doors, and find their lord lying dead on the floor. By then, Ehud is long gone. he has made his way to the hill country of Ephraim, the mountainous central spine of Israelite territory. There, he takes a shofar, a ram's horn, and sounds the call to arms. Imagine that sound not a musical note, but a raw, piercing blast echoing through the valleys and terraces. A sound of alarm, of war, of sudden, electrifying hope. He rallies the dispossessed Israelites with a cry that is both a command and a promise. Follow me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. The news of the king's death must have spread like wildfire. A decapitated enemy, state thrown into chaos. Ehud's military strategy is as brilliant as his assassination plot. He leads his newly mustered army in a mad dash down from the hills to seize the fords of the Jordan River. This is the only escape route for the Moabite garrisons stationed west of the river. By controlling the crossings, Ehud traps them. What follows is not a battle, but a slaughter. The Moabites, leaderless and panicked, are cut down as they try to flee. The text says that about 10,000 Moabites were killed, all of them strong, able-bodied men. Not a man escaped. The reversal of fortune is absolute and total. The oppressed have become the hunters, and the result of this swift, brutal campaign. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. 80 years, 2 full generations of peace, won by the cunning and brutality of one left-handed man. It is the longest period of rest mentioned anywhere in the book of Judges. A golden age born from a single, gory moment in a cool roof chamber. But peace in the world of Judges is always temporary. The 80 years pass. A generation that knew war is replaced by one that knows only peace, and with that peace comes complacency. The cycle begins anew. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. The names change, but the story remains the same. This time, the instrument of punishment is Jabin, the king of Canaan, who reigned from the great city of Hazor in the north, and his power is embodied by his commander, Sisera, who commanded a terrifyingly modern piece of military hardware. 900 iron chariots. To understand the sheer terror inspired by these chariots, we have to put ourselves in the sandals of an Israelite farmer. The Israelites were primarily infantrymen, hill country people. Their strength was in ambushes, in rugged terrain where cavalry and chariots were useless. The Canaanites controlled the plains, like the vast, flat Jezreel Valley. A chariot was the ancient equivalent of a tank. It was a mobile weapons platform, crewed by a driver and an archer or spearman. It was fast, armored, and designed for shock and awe. A single chariot charging at a line of foot soldiers was terrifying. A force of 900 of them was an unimaginable nightmare. It represented a technological and military superiority that was, for all practical purposes, absolute. Against this iron fist, the Israelites had no answer. And so, for 20 years, Sisera and his iron chariots harshly oppressed the people of Israel. This wasn't just about paying tribute. Word harshly implies a constant state of fear, of raids, of violence and violation that ground the people down into a state of utter helplessness. The Song of Deborah, which we will get to later, paints a vivid picture of this time. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Yael, the highways were abandoned, and travelers kept to the byways. Life came to a standstill. Commerce ceased. People were too afraid to leave their walled villages. The iron fist of Sisera choked the life out of the nation. And so, inevitably, the people cry out to the Lord, and the Lord raises up a deliverer. Or, in this case, two deliverers, a pairing of prophetess and general, whose story is a complex dance of faith, fear, leadership, and divine intervention. The primary figure is Deborah. She is introduced not as a warrior, but as a prophetess and a judge. The text says she was Eshet Lapidoth, which is often translated as wife of Lapidoth. But her name, Deborah, means bee, and the name Lapidoth is very similar to the Hebrew word for torches. Many scholars believe her title is better translated as a fiery woman or woman of torches, a description of her spirit and prophetic zeal rather than her marital status. This interpretation certainly fits her character better. She is a towering figure of authority in a deeply patriarchal world. The text tells us that she would sit under a palm tree, the palm of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel, in the hill country of Ephraim, and the people of Israel would come up to her for judgment. She was the supreme court, the civic leader, the direct line to God for the entire nation. She wasn't just a voice in the wilderness. She was the central pillar holding the fractured tribes together. It is Deborah who receives the word from God to begin the rebellion. But she is not a military commander. So she summons a man named Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kedesh in the northern territory of Naphtali. His name, fittingly, means lightning. Deborah delivers the divine command, crisp and clear. Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you? Go, gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun. And I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand. This is a direct order from the commander-in-chief, God himself, relayed through his chosen representative. It's a promise of a divinely orchestrated victory. Barak's response is one of the most debated moments in the story. He looks at this prophetess, this fiery woman, and says, "If you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." On the surface, it sounds like cowardice, a failure of faith. He has a direct promise from God, yet he hesitates, placing a condition on his obedience. Many have interpreted this as Barak being weak-willed, a reluctant hero who needs a woman to hold his hand. But there is a deeper, more generous interpretation. Barak is a military man. He knows what he is up against. 900 iron chariots on the flat plain below Mount Tabor. From a purely military perspective, his mission is suicide. He is being asked to lead 10,000 poorly equipped foot soldiers against a technologically superior, professional army in terrain that perfectly suits them. His hesitation might not be from a lack of personal courage, but from a profound understanding of the odds. His demand that Deborah accompany him may be less about seeking moral support and more about a canny strategic move. He knows that the true authority, the thing that will inspire the men and guarantee the presence of God on the battlefield, is not his own generalship, but the physical presence of the prophetess. He is essentially saying, "This is God's war, not mine. If God's representative is on the field, then I know God is on the field. Without you, this is just a doomed rebellion." Deborah agrees to go, but with a sharp rebuke that is also a prophecy. "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Barak, by seeking a tangible sign of God's presence, inadvertently forfeits the hero's crown. The ultimate victory, the personal glory of killing the enemy commander, will not be his. The prophecy hangs in the air, ambiguous and intriguing. Who is this woman? Is it Deborah herself, or someone else entirely? So the plan is set in motion. Barak musters his 10,000 men from the northern tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, those who had borne the brunt of Sisera's oppression, and positions them on the slopes of Mount Tabor. This mountain is a perfect strategic choice. It's a dome-shaped peak that rises sharply from the flat expanse of the Jezreel Valley, offering a commanding view and a strong defensive position. From there, they can look down on the plain where Sisera's chariots are gathering. Sisera, hearing of the Israelite mobilization, does exactly what God said he would. He gathers all 900 of his chariots and all his troops and marches them to the Kishon River at the foot of the mountain. He is taking the bait. He sees the Israelite infantry on the high ground and likely smirks. He just needs to lure them down onto the plain, his killing field, where his chariots can run them down. Then comes the moment of truth. Deborah turns to Barak and says, "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you?" With that divine assurance, Barak leads his 10,000 men charging down the mountain. From a human perspective, this is madness. It is a descent into certain death. But as they charge, the divine weapon is unleashed. The heavens open up. A massive thunderstorm, a deluge of epic proportions, sweeps across the valley. The Song of Deborah describes it with cosmic poetry. From heaven, the stars fought. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. The placid Kishon River, little more than a dry wadi for much of the year, becomes a raging, flash-flooding torrent. The Jezreel Valley turns into a sea of mud. Suddenly, Sisera's greatest strength becomes his greatest weakness. The iron chariots, so terrifying on dry, flat ground, are now useless liabilities. Their wheels sink into the sucking mud. The horses panic, trapped in their harnesses. The entire high-tech army is immobilized, bogged down, turned into a chaotic mess of sitting ducks. Barak's infantry, nimble and on foot, wade into the quagmire, and the slaughter begins. The Lord, the text says, rooted Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak with the edge of the sword. The Canaanite army is completely annihilated, but Sisera, the commander, manages to escape. He abandons his chariot, stuck in the mud, and flees on foot, a desperate, solitary figure running for his life. He runs north, towards what he believes is a safe haven, the encampment of Heber the Kenite. The Kenites were a clan of nomadic metalworkers, descendants of Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. They were technically neutral, having a peace treaty with King Jabin. Sisera, exhausted and terrified, stumbles towards the tent of Yael, Heber's wife, believing he is invoking the sacred laws of hospitality in a friendly camp. Yael's actions that follow are a masterclass in deception and a shocking violation of every ancient Near Eastern code of conduct. The laws of hospitality were absolute. To welcome someone into your tent was to guarantee them protection, even if they were your enemy. Yael plays the part of the perfect hostess. She goes out to meet him, a sign of welcome. "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me. Do not be afraid," she says. She ushers the most wanted man in Israel into the sanctity of her home, her private tent. She covers him with a rug or a blanket, concealing him. He is thirsty and asks for water. She does him one better. She opens a skin of milk, likely a thick, yogurt-like drink, and gives it to him. It's a rich, heavy drink, far more likely to induce sleep than water. It is a gesture of profound hospitality that is, in reality, a sedative. Sisera, feeling safe and comfortable, gives her one last instruction. "Stand at the entrance of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say, 'No.' Then, utterly spent, he falls into a deep sleep. And in that moment of vulnerability, Yael becomes the woman of Deborah's prophecy. She is not a warrior, not a prophetess, not a public figure. She is a woman in her own domestic space, and she uses the tools of that space as weapons of war. She takes a yated, a tent peg, one of the long, sharp stakes used to anchor the tent ropes to the ground, and she takes a machabbet, a workman's hammer or mallet. She approaches the sleeping general, the terror of Israel, the commander of 900 iron chariots, and with a quiet, horrifying resolve, she places the point of the stake against his temple, and with the hammer, drives it straight through his skull and into the ground beneath him. It is an act of shocking, intimate brutality. The mighty warrior who terrorized thousands is killed not in the heat of battle by a soldier, but in his sleep by a woman with a household tool. Just then Barak arrives, in hot pursuit of his vanquished foe. Yael goes out to meet him, as calmly as she met Sisera. "Come," she says, "and I will show you the man whom you are seeking." She leads him into the tent, and there he is, Sisera, lying dead, with the tent pegged through his temple. Deborah's prophecy is fulfilled in the most unexpected way imaginable. The glory of the kill belongs to Yael. The story of this victory does not end there. It is immediately followed by one of the oldest and most magnificent poems in the entire Bible, the Song of Deborah, found in Judges chapter 5. This is not just a retelling of the story. It is a triumphant, visceral, and theologically rich celebration of the event, likely composed very close to the time it happened. Its Hebrew is archaic, filled with rare words and ancient grammatical forms, giving us a window into the earliest stages of Israelite literature. To analyze this song is to understand how the Israelites themselves processed this victory. It begins with a call to praise, not just to the leaders, but to the people who offered themselves willingly. It immediately establishes a theme of communal effort. Then it flashes back to a grand, cosmic scene of God on the march, a theophany. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. This is not a local tribal deity. This is the God who shakes the foundations of the world, the same God who revealed himself in fire and thunder at Mount Sinai. The battle against Sisera is framed as an act of this same cosmically powerful God. The poem then vividly recounts the misery of the Canaanite oppression, the abandoned highways, the fear that permeated daily life, before celebrating the rise of Deborah. The villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased to be until I, Deborah, arose. I arose as a mother in Israel. It's a powerful image. She is not a queen or a general, but a mother, rising to protect her children. Then comes one of the most fascinating parts of the poem, a roll call of the tribes. It is a stark look at the fragile and fractured nature of the Israelite confederacy. The poem heaps praise on the tribes that answered the call. Ephraim, Benjamin, Machir, part of Manasseh, Issachar. It reserves its highest honor for the two tribes at the heart of the battle, Zebulun and Naphtali, who jeopardized their lives to the death on the heights of the field. But the poem is equally powerful in its biting sarcasm and outright condemnation of the tribes who stayed home. The tribe of Reuben across the Jordan is mocked. Why did you sit still among the sheepfolds to hear the pipings for the flocks? Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. They talked a big game, they debated it, they searched their hearts, but ultimately they did nothing. Gilead, Gad, stayed beyond the Jordan. The tribe of Dan, a seafaring people, inexplicably stayed with the ships. Asher sat still at the coast of the sea, staying by his landings. This section is a priceless historical document, revealing the deep divisions and self-interest that plagued the tribes. They were not a unified nation, but a loose collection of clans who often failed to support one another. The poem reaches its crescendo with the battle scene, invoking the heavens themselves as combatants. The river Kishon swept them away, the ancient river, the river Kishon. O my soul, march on with strength. And then, in a strange and singular verse, it curses an entire town that refused to help. Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants thoroughly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord against the mighty. Whoever they were, their failure to act earned them a permanent place of infamy in this victory ode. From this curse, the poem pivots to its most extravagant blessing, showered upon the unlikely hero of the story, Yael. Most blessed of women be Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of tent-dwelling women, most blessed. The poem elevates her above all other women. It lingers on the details of her actions, turning the brutal killing into a thing of poetic beauty. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a noble's bowl. She sent her hand to the tent peg, and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera. She crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple. The repetition hammers home the finality of the act, but the poem's stroke of genius, the thing that elevates it from a mere victory chant to a complex work of art, is its final scene. The camera suddenly shifts, leaving the gore of Yale's tent and traveling to the palace of Sisera. We see his mother waiting, staring out a lattice window. Her voice is filled with anxiety. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the hoofbeats of his chariots? Her ladies in waiting, her wisest princesses, offer a comforting, chillingly plausible explanation. Have they not found and divided the spoil? A womb or two for every man, spoil of dyed materials for Sisera, spoil of dyed materials embroidered, 2 pieces of embroidered work for the neck of the spoiler. This is one of the rawest and most disturbing lines in biblical poetry. They imagine their conquering hero is delayed because he is busy distributing captured women as sex slaves among his soldiers. It is a stark, horrifying window into the accepted brutalities of ancient warfare and the fate that would have awaited Israelite women had the battle gone the other way. This scene is profoundly human. It forces the audience to feel, just for a moment, the grief and anxiety of the enemy's mother. It makes her a real person, not a caricature. Her hope, based on the assumed violation of others, makes Sisera's death at the hands of a woman, the very gender he sought to victimize, a moment of stunning, poetic justice. The poem ends with a final, fierce prayer. So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but your friends be like the sun as he rises in his might. And once again, after the storm of war, there is peace, and the land had rest for 40 years. 2 stories back to back of deliverance from oppression. One, a tale of a lone assassin, a left-handed man using trickery and intimate violence in the heart of the enemy palace. The other, a tale of a national war led by a prophetess, decided by a divine storm, and climaxing with an act of brutal hospitality by a woman in her tent. They are stories of unconventional heroes, of the weak confounding the strong, the underestimated defeating the seemingly invincible. They show a God who works through the marginalized, the left-handed, the woman to achieve his purposes. But they are also unflinchingly brutal. There is no romance in this warfare. It is bloody, treacherous, and deeply personal, and it sets a dark and violent tone for the stories that are yet to come. For as long as the peace may last, the refrain is always waiting in the wings. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. The cycle is not yet broken. The cycle is not yet broken. In the brutal, cyclical world of the Book of Judges, peace is merely the fallow ground in which the seeds of the next apostasy are sown. The 40 years of rest, won by Deborah's faith and Yale's tent peg, come to an end, and the familiar, terrible refrain returns. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. The specifics of their evil are not detailed. They are, by now, tragically predictable. The worship of the Baals and the Asherahs, the Canaanite fertility gods, the forgetting of the covenant, the slow, creeping assimilation into the pagan culture that surrounded them. And as always, their sin creates a vacuum of divine protection, an open invitation for judgment. The Lord, the text says, gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. This time, the oppression feels different. It is not the centralized political domination of a king like Eglon, who set up a throne and demanded tribute. It is not the high-tech military lockdown of a general like Sisera with his iron chariots. This is something more primal, more devastating. This is chaos incarnate. The Midianites, a nomadic people from the deserts to the southeast, pour into the land, and they don't come alone. They are joined by the Amalekites, Israel's ancient and bitter foe, and a vast, faceless coalition called the people of the East. Their numbers are described with terrifying elemental imagery. They came up with their livestock and their tents, coming like locusts in number. Both they and their camels were without number. This wasn't an army of occupation. It was a human plague. Their strategy was not conquest, but consumption. They would wait until the Israelites had planted their crops, tended their fields, and the harvest was ready. Then, just as the people were about to reap the rewards of their labor, the horizon would darken with the dust of innumerable camels. The raiders would sweep through the valleys, a tide of destruction that devoured everything in its path. They took the grain, the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys. The text says they would devour the produce of the land, leaving no sustenance in Israel. For 7 years, this was the pattern. A year of hard, hopeful work, followed by a season of terror and total loss. It was a perfect engine of demoralization, designed to grind a people into absolute poverty and despair. The result was a complete breakdown of society. The Israelites abandoned their homes and villages on the valley floors. They became a nation of fugitives, hiding in the mountains, living in dens and caves and strongholds. They were reduced from a landed people, inheritors of a promise, to hunted animals, scrounging for survival in holes in the ground. And the narrator concludes the description with a stark, simple statement. And Israel was brought very low because of Midian. It is from this rock bottom, from this place of utter degradation, that the people finally cry out to the Lord. But this time, God's response is different. Before he sends a deliverer, he sends a diagnostician. He sends an unnamed prophet to the people, and this prophet does not bring words of comfort or promises of imminent salvation. He brings a searing indictment. He stands before the terrified, starving people hiding in their caves, and forces them to confront the root of their own suffering. His sermon is a condensed history of God's faithfulness and their faithlessness. He begins by reminding them of their identity. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. He reminds them of the conquest, of God's power to drive out the inhabitants of Canaan before them. He reminds them of the foundational promise, I will be your God. Then comes the charge, the accusation that hangs heavy in the air. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But you have not obeyed my voice. This is a crucial moment. God is making it clear that their predicament is not a matter of bad luck or military weakness. It is a spiritual disease, a self-inflicted wound. He holds up a mirror to their own history and forces them to see their own reflection. Before any deliverance can happen, there must be an understanding of why the deliverance is necessary in the first place. Their problem isn't the Midianites. The Midianites are just a symptom. Their problem is their own divided heart. It is only after this harsh dose of truth that the narrative camera zooms in to find our next judge. And the way we meet him is profoundly telling. The angel of the Lord, a manifestation of God himself, comes and sits under the terebinth tree at Ophrah, a village in the territory of the tribe of Manasseh. And there he sees a young man named Gideon, son of Joash the Abizrite. And what is Gideon doing? He is not on a watchtower, scanning the horizon for raiders. He is not in a war council, planning a rebellion. He is beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. Let's pause and consider the pathos of this image. Thrashing wheat is a process that requires wind. It was normally done on a thrashing floor, an open, flat, elevated space where after the grain was beaten, it could be tossed into the air for the wind to carry away the lighter chaff, leaving the heavier kernels of wheat to fall to the ground. A winepress, by contrast, is the exact opposite. It's a pit dug into the ground, a confined, airless space designed to contain liquid. For Gideon to be thrashing wheat in a winepress is a sign of his utter desperation and fear. It is cramped, inefficient, and deeply undignified work. He is hiding in a hole, secretly trying to salvage a pitifully small amount of grain, the very picture of a man and a nation brought low. It is to this man, in this moment of fearful, clandestine activity, that the angel of the Lord appears and speaks a greeting that is so saturated with divine irony, it practically drips from the page. The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. Mighty man of valor. Gideon is the antithesis of a mighty warrior. He is a farmer hiding in a ditch. He is the embodiment of Israel's fear. Gideon looks up from his work, and his response is not one of awe or faith. It is a blast of raw, unfiltered cynicism, the voice of a man whose hope has been ground into dust by 7 years of suffering. Please, sir, he says, his voice dripping with sarcasm, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. This is one of the most honest and relatable prayers in the entire Bible. It is the cry of Job, the lament of the psalmists. Gideon doesn't pretend to have faith he doesn't feel. He confronts the angel with the massive, gaping chasm between the stories he was told as a child, the glorious tales of Exodus and conquest, and the brutal reality of his lived experience. He is essentially saying, "Your words and my world do not match. If God is with us, he has a funny way of showing it." He is a man drowning in cognitive dissonance, and he is not afraid to say so. The divine response is not to rebuke his doubt, but to commission him in the midst of it. The Lord turns to him and says, "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian." Do not I send you? The phrase, "this might of yours," is fascinating. What might? The might of a man hiding in a winepress, the might of his cynicism. Or perhaps God is redefining might. Perhaps the might God is looking for is not physical strength or military prowess, but the raw honesty to wrestle with doubt, the courage to ask the hard questions. God doesn't wait for Gideon to become a hero. He calls him as he is, a bundle of fear and disillusionment. Gideon, however, is not convinced. He immediately falls back on a litany of excuses, piling up his inadequacies like a barricade against the divine call. "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." This is the classic cry of the reluctant prophet, echoing Moses' own feelings of inadequacy at the burning bush. He sees himself as a nobody from nowhere, the smallest fish in a small pond. He is doubly insignificant, coming from the weakest family in a minor tribe. From a human perspective, he is the least likely candidate to lead a national liberation movement. But once again, this fits the pattern of the God of Judges. God doesn't choose the obvious hero. He bypasses the powerful and the privileged to choose the weak, the overlooked, the least, so that when victory comes, there can be no doubt as to its source. God's answer to Gideon's excuses is not to argue with his assessment of his own weakness, but to render it irrelevant. "But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man." The promise is not that Gideon will be strong enough, but that God's presence will be sufficient. Even with this direct, personal encounter, Gideon remains a man consumed by doubt. He needs proof. He needs a sign that this is real, that he is not just hallucinating from hunger and fear in the bottom of a winepress. "If I have found favor in your eyes," he pleads, "then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me." He asks the angel to wait while he prepares an offering, a young goat, and unleavened bread made from an ephah of flour. This is not a small snack. It is a lavish meal, a kingly offering. He brings the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, and presents it to the angel under the terebinth tree. The angel instructs him to place the meat and the bread on a nearby rock and to pour out the broth. Then the angel touches the offering with the tip of the staff in his hand. Instantly, fire leaps up from the rock and consumes the entire offering. And just as suddenly, the angel of the Lord vanishes. The reality of the encounter crashes down upon Gideon. He has not been talking to a mere messenger. He has seen God face to face. And in the ancient world, to see God was to die. "Alas, O Lord God," he cries, "for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But God reassures him, "Peace be to you. Do not fear, you shall not die." In response, Gideon builds an altar on that spot, nomming it Yahweh Shalom, the Lord is peace. It is his first tentative step from doubt towards faith, a memorial to the moment when his terror was met not with judgment, but with peace. That very night, Gideon receives his first orders, and they are not a call to muster an army, but a demand for religious purification, starting in his own backyard. God commands him, "Take your father's bull and the second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it." He is to take the sacred pagan objects that are the source of Israel's spiritual sickness, the very reason for the Midianite oppression, and destroy them. And in their place, he is to build a proper altar to the Lord on the stronghold, and then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering, using the wood of the chopped down Asherah pole as fuel. This is an act of breathtaking provocation. He is being asked to commit a sacrilegious act against the gods of his own family and his own town, using his father's property to do it. Gideon obeys, but the text adds a crucial detail. He was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, so he did it by night. Our mighty man of valor is still a man ruled by fear. He believes God, but he is still terrified of his neighbors. It's a wonderfully human portrait. He acts in faith, but he does so under the cover of darkness, hoping no one will find out. Of course, they do. The next morning, the men of the town see their sacred altar demolished, their Asherah pole gone, and a new altar with the remains of a sacrifice smoking on top of it. They quickly discover who is responsible, and an angry mob descends on the house of Joash, Gideon's father, demanding his son. "Bring out your son, that he may die," they shout, "for he has broken down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah beside it." It is here that Gideon's father, Joash, who had seemed to be the custodian of the town's idolatry, has a surprising change of heart. He stands up to the mob and defends his son with a piece of brilliant, sarcastic logic. "Will you contend for Baal?" he asks them. "Or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down." It's a verbal smackdown. He is essentially telling them, if your God is so powerful, why does he need you to fight his battles for him? Let's just wait and see if Baal can muster up a lightning bolt to strike my son. If not, maybe he's not much of a god after all. His argument silences the crowd, and Gideon is saved. From that day on, he is given a new name, a title of honor born from this confrontation, Jerubbaal, which means, "Let Baal contend against him." Now that the spiritual house has been put in order, the military threat reappears. The Midianites, Amalekites, and people of the east muster their forces once again and camp in the Jezreel Valley. It is the moment of crisis. And then something shifts in Gideon. The text says, "The Spirit of the Lord clothed itself with Gideon." It's a powerful image, suggesting not just an influence, but a complete envelopment. Gideon, empowered and emboldened, sounds the shofar, the ram's horn, and his own clan of Abiezer rallies to him. He sends messengers throughout the northern tribes, and a sizable army begins to gather. But even now, even after the sign of the flaming sacrifice and the empowerment of the Spirit, Gideon's old doubt creeps back in. He has an army, but he is about to face an impossibly large foe. He needs one more sign, one final, absolute confirmation. And this leads to the famous story of the fleece. It is often portrayed as an act of quaint, simple faith, but in reality, it is an act of profound insecurity, of a man bargaining with God and dictating the terms of a miracle. He places a fleece of wool on the thrashing floor and says to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I am laying a fleece of wool on the thrashing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know." It is a very specific, unnatural request. And God, in a moment of incredible grace and condescension to Gideon's weakness, does it. The next morning, the ground is bone dry, but Gideon wrings a full bowl of water from the fleece. Any normal person would be convinced. But Gideon is not a normal person. His fear is so deep-seated that he needs to be sure this wasn't just a fluke, a freak atmospheric event. So he pushes his luck, asking for a second, even more difficult sign. "Let not your anger burn against me. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground let there be dew." To make a small, absorbent object wet while the ground is dry is one thing. To make the large, open ground wet while keeping the absorbent fleece perfectly dry is an even greater miracle. And again, God patiently accommodates his fearful child. The next morning, the fleece is dry and the ground is covered with dew. Finally, Gideon has the proof he needs. He is ready to go to war. Gideon has managed to assemble an army of 32,000 men. It's a respectable force, though still massively outnumbered by the Midianite horde. But God looks at this army and sees a problem. Not a military problem, but a theological one. "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand," God tells Gideon, "lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.'" This is the core principle of this entire operation. The victory must be so ludicrous, so statistically impossible, that no one in Israel can plausibly take credit for it. The glory must go to God alone. So begins a process of divine downsizing. The first cut is based on fear. Gideon is to make an announcement based on a law from the book of Deuteronomy. "Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead." The response is staggering. 22,000 men, more than 2/3 of his army, pack up and leave. They were willing to show up, but when faced with the reality of the enemy camped below them, their courage failed. This leaves Gideon with 10,000 men. Still a decent number. But God says, the people are still too many. The second cut is one of the strangest tests in the Bible. God tells Gideon to take the remaining 10,000 men down to the water. "Everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink." Imagine the scene. A thirsty army comes to a spring or a river. The vast majority, 9,700 of them, get down on their knees, put their faces into the water and drink their fill. They are vulnerable, their heads down, their awareness of their surroundings diminished. But a tiny group, just 300 men, do it differently. They stay on their feet, scooping water with their hands and lapping it up, their eyes still scanning the horizon. They remain alert, poised, ready for action, even while quenching their thirst. For centuries, commentators have tried to figure out the significance of this test. Was it that the 300 were more vigilant, better soldiers? Or were they the humbler ones, not daring to kneel like the others? The text offers no explanation. The test is arbitrary. The point is not the quality of the men, but the quantity. God wanted a ridiculously small number, and this was the method he chose to arrive at it. Gideon's army is now reduced from 32,000 to a mere 300. 300 men to face an enemy whose camels were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. The odds have now moved from challenging to utterly absurd. This is no longer a battle. It is a suicide mission. God knows that Gideon, a man already prone to fear, must be terrified by this development. So he offers him one final, personal piece of encouragement. That night, God tells him, "Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hands shall be strengthened." Gideon, still afraid, takes the offer. He and his servant sneak down to the edge of the vast Midianite encampment under the cover of darkness. As they listen, they overhear one Midianite soldier telling another about a dream he just had. "Behold, I dreamed a dream," he says, "and behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down so that the tent lay flat." The dream is bizarre, but the other soldier's interpretation is immediate and filled with terror. This is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. The symbolism is potent. Barley bread was the cheapest, coarsest grain, the food of the poor and the peasants. It was a perfect symbol for Gideon's pathetic, outnumbered army of farmers. The tent, by contrast, was the symbol of the nomadic, powerful Midianite warriors. The dream was a divine prophecy delivered into the heart of the enemy camp, that the lowly and the weak, the barley loaf, would miraculously overturn the powerful, the tent. For Gideon, eavesdropping in the darkness, this is the final, irrefutable confirmation he needed. He hears the enemy's own terror, their own conviction that God has already decreed their defeat. At that moment, all of Gideon's fear vanishes. The text says he worshipped. He bows down right there on the edge of the enemy camp, his heart finally filled not with doubt, but with faith. He returns to his 300 men, his voice now ringing with authority. "Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand." Gideon's battle plan is a masterpiece of psychological warfare, designed not to defeat the enemy with force, but to make the enemy defeat themselves. He divides his 300 men into 3 companies of 100, positioning them on 3 sides of the valley where the Midianites are sleeping. And their weapons are utterly unconventional. Each man is given a shofar, an empty clay jar, and a torch to hide inside the jar. These are not instruments of slaughter, but instruments of terror. The attack is timed for the changing of the guard in the middle of the night, when the camp is at its most disoriented. At Gideon's signal, a single trumpet blast from his position, the plan is unleashed. All at once, 300 men smash their clay jars. The sudden, sharp, crashing sound would echo through the valley. As the jars break, 300 blazing torches are revealed, creating the illusion of a massive army appearing out of the darkness. And at the same moment, all 300 men blow their war trumpets, a deafening, terrifying blast that would sound like the charge of thousands. And as they blow, they shout the battle cry, Cherev el Adonai Uel Gidon, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. The effect on the sleeping Midianite camp is exactly what Gideon intended. Absolute panic. Woken from a deep sleep by the shattering pottery, the sudden appearance of lights everywhere, and the deafening sound of an army of trumpets, they are thrown into total confusion. In the darkness, they cannot tell friend from foe. They assume they are being overrun by a massive, encircling army. The narrator says, "The Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army." The Midianites begin slaughtering each other in a frenzy of panic-driven friendly fire. The camp dissolves into chaos as the terrified survivors break and flee, running blindly into the night. The great victory is won without Gideon's 300 men striking a single blow. It is a victory of light, sound, and divinely inspired terror. The story could have, and perhaps should have, ended there, on this high note of miraculous victory. But the narrative continues into chapter 8, and it is here that we witness Gideon's tragic and disturbing transformation. The hero's halo begins to tarnish, and a dark, vengeful side of his character emerges. The first sign of trouble comes from within Israel itself. As the Midianites flee, Gideon calls for reinforcements from the tribe of Ephraim to cut off their retreat at the Jordan River. The Ephraimites succeed, capturing and executing 2 Midianite princes, Oreb, raven, and Zeb, wolf. But instead of celebrating the shared victory, they come to Gideon, seething with wounded pride. "What is this thing you have done to us?" they demand. "Not to call us when you went to fight with Midian." They were the most powerful tribe in the north, and they felt slighted, left out of the main event, denied their rightful share of the glory. Their complaint is so aggressive that the text says they accused him fiercely. Here, Gideon shows remarkable diplomacy. He diffuses the situation with masterful flattery. "What have I done now in comparison with you?" he asks. "Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer?" It's a clever proverb. He's saying that their small, leftover contribution, the gleanings, is actually more valuable than his clan's main effort, the vintage. He reminds them that they were the ones who killed the enemy princes. His words appeal to their pride, and their anger subsides. He averts a civil war with a soft answer. But the incident reveals the toxic tribal jealousies that are a constant threat to Israel's unity. Gideon and his 300 faithful men, though exhausted yet pursuing, continue the chase after the two Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, who had escaped. He comes to the Israelite town of Sukkot and makes a simple request for provisions for his starving men. "Please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted," he says. But the officials of Sukkot refuse him. Their response is a piece of cynical political calculation. "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your army?" They are hedging their bets. Gideon is pursuing the main enemy force with only 300 men. The odds are still against him. If he fails, the Midianite kings will surely return and punish anyone who helped him. So they refuse to help a fellow Israelite, prioritizing their own security over national solidarity. Gideon, the man who was once so timid he threshed wheat in a winepress, is now a hardened military commander, and his response is swift and chilling. He makes a vow of brutal retribution. "Well then," he says, "when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will thresh your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars." He marches on to the next town, Peniel, and makes the same request. He receives the same refusal, and he makes a similar vow. "When I come back in peace, I will break down this tower." He goes on to capture the two kings in a surprise attack, routing their remaining army. Then he turns back to make good on his terrible promises. He returns to Sukkot, captures the 77 elders of the town, and as he had vowed, he takes thorns and briars from the wilderness and tortures them to death with them. He taught the men of Sukkot a lesson, the text says grimly. He then proceeds to Peniel, tears down their defensive tower, and kills the men of the city. This is a shocking, horrifying turn. The deliverer of Israel has become the butcher of his own people. His actions are disproportionately violent, a terrifying display of vengeful fury against those who failed to support him. The humble farmer is gone, replaced by a ruthless warlord. The darkness deepens. Gideon interrogates the captive kings, Zebah and Zalmunna. "What kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor?" he asks. Their answer reveals they are aware of Gideon's royal bearing. "As you are, so were they. Every one of them resembled the son of a king." And Gideon's reply reveals a hidden, personal motive for this entire war that we are only now learning about. "They were my brothers," he says, his voice cold with rage, "the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you." This whole national campaign was also a personal blood feud. He commands his firstborn son, Jether, to execute the kings, to blood the boy, and initiate him as a warrior. But Jether is too young and too afraid. So Gideon rises and kills the kings himself, taking the golden crescent ornaments from their camels' necks as trophies. After this string of stunning victories, the people of Israel come to Gideon with the ultimate offer. "Rule over us," they say, "you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." They are offering to make him a king, to establish a hereditary dynasty. In a world with no central government, constantly under threat, it's a logical step. Gideon's response seems, on the surface, to be perfectly pious and correct. "I will not rule over you," he declares, "and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." He rejects the crown and gives the glory to God. It is the perfect theological answer, but his very next action completely undermines his pious words. In the very next breath, he says, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil." The victorious Israelites gladly give him the golden earrings and other ornaments they took from the Midianites. The total weight of the gold is 1,700 shekels, an enormous fortune, somewhere between 40 and 50 pounds of solid gold. Gideon has refused the title of king, but he is more than willing to accept the tribute of a king. And what he does with this gold is his final, tragic undoing. He melts it down and creates a golden ephod. In the Old Testament, an ephod was part of the high priest's sacred vestments, used to discern the will of God. But given the massive amount of gold, what Gideon made was almost certainly not a garment, but a solid gold, freestanding cult object, an idol. He sets this idol up in his hometown of Ophrah, and the narrator delivers the devastating verdict on Gideon's career. "And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family." This is the ultimate tragedy of the story. Gideon, the man who began his public ministry by tearing down an altar to Baal in this very same town, ends his career by creating a new, even more seductive idol that leads the entire nation back into idolatry. The man who was called Jerubbaal, "Let Baal contend," has created a new Baal for Israel to worship. He wins the war against the foreign oppressors, but he loses the war for the heart of his own people and for his own heart. The deliverer becomes the ensnarer. He provides 40 years of political peace, but he leaves behind a spiritual poison pill that will corrupt Israel and, as we will soon see, destroy his own family. Gideon's story is a profound cautionary tale. It is a journey from a fearful man in a winepress to a conquering hero, and then a downward spiral into a vengeful tyrant and a catastrophic idolater. He is perhaps the most tragic of all the judges, a man who flew so close to the sun, only to be undone by the darkness within himself. His legacy is not the victory, but the snare. Gideon's legacy was not peace, but a snare. The 40 years of quiet he purchased with his victory were a thin crust of ice over a boiling sea of apostasy and ambition. The golden ephod he crafted in Ophrah did its work well, teaching a new generation that God could be localized, managed, and worshipped in the form of a glittering idol. It taught them that the transactional faith of their pagan neighbors was a viable alternative to the difficult, demanding covenant of Yahweh. And this spiritual rot had immediate and bloody political consequences. Gideon, in his later years, had amassed a harem, serving 70 sons. But he also had a concubine in the city of Shechem who bore him a son named Abimelech, a name that ironically means my father is king." Upon Gideon's death, Abimelech, fueled by ambition and resentment, went to his mother's kin in Shechem and orchestrated a coup. With their backing, he slaughtered all 70 of his half-brothers on a single stone, a human sacrifice to his own lust for power. He then had himself crowned king, a bloody and illegitimate monarchy that lasted a mere 3 years before collapsing into a spiral of betrayal, rebellion, and his own ignominious death, his skull crushed by a millstone dropped by a woman from a tower wall. This brief, horrifying interlude of Abimelech, the anti-judge, is the rotten fruit of Gideon's flawed legacy. It is a testament to the fact that even a great deliverer, if he loses his spiritual way, can unleash a torrent of destruction upon his own house and his own people. After this catastrophic failure of human kingship, the land seems to settle. The narrative of Judges mentions 2 minor judges, Tola and Jair, who rule for a combined 45 years. We know little about them, and their peaceful tenures are described in just a few short verses. They are the calm before the next, and perhaps the most spiritually dark, storm, because after they passed, the cycle returns with a vengeance. The familiar refrain rings out, but this time with a new and terrifying scope. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. This time, however, it is not just a flirtation with the local Baals and Asherahs. The spiritual sickness has metastasized. The narrator provides a sickening catalog of their infidelity. They served the Baals and the Ashtaroth, the gods of Syria, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. It is a complete and total spiritual capitulation. They have turned their back on the one God who delivered them and have gone pantheon shopping, collecting deities from every surrounding nation like trinkets. Their hearts have become a crowded marketplace of foreign gods, each one a testament to their desperation and their profound lack of faith in the God of their fathers. The final, damning sentence of the indictment is the most telling. "And they forsook the Lord and did not serve him." The divine response to this flagrant, widespread apostasy is equally widespread. God's anger burns, and he sells them into the hands of 2 enemies at once, the Philistines to the west and the Ammonites to the east. For 18 years, the Ammonites in particular crushed and oppressed the Israelites living in Gilead, the territory east of the Jordan River. But their ambition didn't stop there. They began to cross the Jordan, making war against the core tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim. The nation was being squeezed in a vice, and the text says, Israel was severely distressed. And so, as they always do when the pain becomes unbearable, they cry out to the Lord. "We have sinned against you," they confess, "because we have forsaken our God and served the Baals." It sounds like a moment of genuine repentance, but God's response this time is unlike any other in the book of Judges. It is a response of pure, cutting exasperation, the voice of a Savior who has reached the limits of his patience. He doesn't offer comfort or promise a deliverer. Instead, he answers with a scathing, sarcastic tirade, listing his resume of past salvations like a spurned and resentful benefactor. "Did I not save you from the Egyptians?" he asks, his voice dripping with irony. "And from the Amorites, from the Ammonites, and from the Philistines. The Sidonians also, and the Amalekites and the Maonites oppressed you, and you cried out to me, and I saved you out of their hand." He recounts 7 past deliverances, a perfect number of reminders of their repeated failures and his constant, thankless faithfulness. Then comes the shocking, brutal conclusion. "Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods, therefore I will save you no more. Go and cry out to the gods whom you have chosen. Let them save you in the time of your distress." This is one of the most terrifying moments in the entire biblical narrative. God essentially resigns. He tells them, "You've made your choice. You wanted these other gods. Fine. You're on your own. Go see if the god of Moab can stop a charging Ammonite army. Go ask the goddess of Sidon for a harvest. You are suffering the consequences of your own choices. Do not come crying to me." It is the sound of a door slamming shut, of a covenant seemingly broken by the sheer, stubborn weight of human infidelity. This divine rejection seems to work. It shocks the Israelites into a deeper level of repentance. It is one thing to suffer under an enemy's hand. It is another entirely to be told by your only hope that he is done with you. The people respond with a more profound confession. "We have sinned. Do to us whatever seems good to you. Only please deliver us this day." It is a cry of unconditional surrender. They stop making excuses. They stop trying to bargain. They simply throw themselves at God's mercy, and they follow it up with action. So they put away the foreign gods from among them and served the Lord. And the final sentence of this episode is one of profound, unexpected tenderness. "And he became impatient over the misery of Israel." The Hebrew is more visceral. His soul was shortened or grieved by their suffering. Even in his anger, he cannot bear to watch their pain. The door, it seems, is not locked after all, but God remains silent. He does not immediately send a hero. He waits. Meanwhile, the military crisis is escalating. The Ammonite army gathers and encamps in Gilead. The Israelites gather their own forces and camp at a place called Mizpah. The two armies face each other, a standoff pregnant with menace. But the Israelites have a critical problem. They have soldiers, but they have no leader. There is no Barak, no Gideon, no one with the authority or the skill to lead them into battle. The elders and commanders of Gilead are in a state of panic, and in their desperation, they make a public, binding offer to the entire army. Who is the man who will begin to fight against the Ammonites? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. It is a blank check of power. They are not just looking for a general, they are looking for a ruler. They are willing to make anyone who can deliver them from this mess their new political chief. The stage is set for a savior, but the man who will step forward is not a humble farmer or a respected leader. He is a scarred, angry outcast, a man forged in the fires of rejection and violence. His name is Jephthah. The narrator introduces him with a biography that is a study in stark contrasts. Now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior, but he was the son of a prostitute. In that one sentence, his entire life's conflict is laid bare. He possesses the essential quality needed in this moment of crisis. He is a Gibber Chael, a mighty man of valor, the very same honorific used ironically for Gideon. He has the skill, the strength, the charisma of a natural-born warrior, but he also carries a deep, ineradicable social stain. His mother was a prostitute, an outsider, a woman of no social standing. This makes him a half-breed in the eyes of society, a living symbol of his father's shame. His father's name was Gilead, the same as the region itself, suggesting he was a prominent chieftain. And Gilead also had legitimate sons, born to his legal wife. The narrator describes what happened with cold, simple brutality, and his wife's sons grew up and drove Jephthah away. Their words to him were like stones. "You shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." It was a complete and total rejection. He was not just disinherited from his share of the land and property. He was excommunicated from the family, cast out from the clan, rendered a legal and social nonentity. He was, in their eyes, human garbage to be disposed of and forgotten. So Jephthah flees. He runs from the settled, civilized lands of Gilead to the lawless frontier region known as the land of Tob. And it is there, in this ancient equivalent of the Wild West, that he finds a new kind of family. The text says that worthless fellows collected around Jephthah and went out with him. The term worthless fellows, Anshim Rikim, literally means empty men. These were other outcasts, debtors, fugitives, landless men with nothing to lose and no place in respectable society. With these men, Jephthah forms a gang, a private army. He becomes a bandit chief, a mercenary captain, honing his skills as a warrior not in the service of his nation, but in raids and skirmishes on the edge of the desert. For years, this is his life. He survives by the sword. His worldview is shaped by betrayal and the harsh pragmatism of the outlaw. He is a man who understands power, violence, and the brutal calculus of survival. This is the man that the elders of Gilead, in their desperation, now seek out. The scene of their reunion is thick with tension and bitter irony. The same men, or at least the same class of men, who sanctioned his expulsion, now make the long journey to the land of Tob. They find Jephthah in his stronghold and deliver their desperate plea. "Come and be our Katsan commander, that we may fight against the Ammonites." Jephthah looks at these men, his face likely a mask of contempt. His reply is not the humble protestation of a Gideon. It is the raw, furious voice of a man who has carried the wound of rejection his entire life. "Did you not hate me and drive me out of my father's house?" He spits. "Why have you come to me now when you are in trouble?" He calls them out on their staggering hypocrisy. They only want him now because they are desperate. They see him not as a brother, but as a tool, a weapon to be used, and presumably discarded once the threat has passed. The elders don't even try to deny it. They are in no position to argue. "That is why we have turned to you now," they admit, "that you may go with us and fight against the Ammonites." And then they restate their offer sweetening the deal significantly. It is not just about being a temporary military commander. You will be our Rosh head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. This is the real prize. Rosh means head, chief, ruler. They are offering him supreme and permanent political authority over the very people who cast him out. It is the ultimate vindication, the ultimate revenge. Jephthah, the hard-bitten mercenary, is not a man who acts on vague promises. He needs a contract, a binding oath. If you bring me home again to fight against the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them over to me, I will be your head, he confirms. The elders agree. The Lord will be witness between us. We will surely do as you say. So Jephthah takes them to the sanctuary at Mizpah, the very place where the Israelite army is gathered. And there, before the Lord, they formalize the oath. Jephthah, the outcast son of a prostitute, is now the official head of Gilead. He has leveraged their desperation into his own coronation. But notice the terms of his deal. His entire future, his entire claim to power, is conditional if the Lord gives the Ammonites over to him. His relationship with God, right from the start, is framed as a transaction, a bargain. This contractual view of the divine will prove to be his tragic flaw. Now in command, Jephthah's first move is surprisingly not military, but diplomatic. He sends messengers to the king of the Ammonites, attempting to de-escalate the conflict. What do you have against me, that you have come to me to fight against my land? He asks. The Ammonite king replies with a historical claim. Israel stole his land when they came out of Egypt, the territory between the Arnon and Jabbok rivers. He demands it back peacefully. Jephthah responds with a second, much longer message, a detailed legal and historical rebuttal that shows he is far more than an uneducated thug. He demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of Israel's history, the narrative of the Book of Numbers. He argues, point by point, that Israel did not take the land from Ammon. They took it from Sihon, king of the Amorites, after Sihon attacked them without provocation. For 300 years, he points out, Israel has inhabited this land without any dispute from Ammon. Why, he asks, are you bringing this up now? He then moves from a historical argument to a theological one. He points to the Ammonite god, Chemosh, or Milcom, and says, will you not possess what Chemosh your god gives you to possess? And then the clincher. And all that the Lord our God has dispossessed before us, we will possess. He is essentially saying, you keep what your God gives you, we'll keep what our God gives us. Our God beat their God, so the land is ours. Concludes his diplomatic mission with a formal appeal to divine justice, effectively declaring a holy war. I have not sinned against you, but you are doing me wrong by making war on me. The Lord, the judge, be judge this day between the people of Israel and the people of Ammon. It is a masterful piece of rhetoric, establishing Israel as the wronged party and placing the outcome of the impending battle squarely in God's hands. The Ammonite king, however, ignores him completely. The time for talk is over. War is now inevitable. And just as with the judges before him, Jephthah is divinely equipped for the task. The text says, then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah. He is clothed in divine power, just as Gideon was. He has the assurance of God's presence and empowerment. He marches his army through Gilead and Manasseh, gathering his forces, preparing for the decisive confrontation. And it is in this moment, filled with the Spirit of God, on his way to a battle he is empowered to win, that Jephthah makes a disastrous, unnecessary, and utterly tragic mistake. He makes a vow, and Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, "If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be the Lord, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering." This vow is the dark, terrible heart of Jephthah's story. We must stop and analyze it from every angle, for in these few words, a catastrophic tragedy is born. Why does he do it? The Spirit of the Lord is already upon him. Why does he feel the need to bargain with God to sweeten the deal? Perhaps his faith is thin. Perhaps the God of Israel is still, for him, a distant deity, a God to be negotiated with, not trusted. Perhaps his life as an outlaw and mercenary has taught him that nothing is free, that every victory has a price, a payment that must be guaranteed up front. Perhaps he is simply importing the religious practices of his pagan neighbors, for whom such conditional vows to a deity were commonplace. In the world of Chemosh and Melech, you didn't get something for nothing. You had to promise the god a worthy payment in order to secure their favor. Jephthah, empowered by the Spirit of Yahweh, tragically defaults to the logic of paganism, and the wording of the vow itself is chillingly ambiguous. Whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me, what is he envisioning? The most charitable interpretation is that he was thinking of an animal, perhaps a dog or a goat from his flocks would be the first to greet him. In this case, his vow was rash, but not monstrous. But the doors of a house are primarily for people. Did he not consider that a servant or a family member might be the first to greet a returning victorious hero? The second half of the vow is even more debated. Shall be the Lord, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. The Hebrew conjunction vav here, translated as and, can, in some contexts, mean or. This has led some interpreters, desperate to soften the horror of the story, to argue that Jephthah meant, whatever comes out shall be dedicated to the Lord's service, if it's a person, or I will offer it as a burnt offering, if it's an animal. In this reading, if a person came out, they would be consecrated to a life of service to God, like a Nazarite, not killed. But this reading, while comforting, strains against the grain of the narrative. The term for burnt offering, olah, almost exclusively refers to a sacrifice that is wholly consumed by fire on an altar. Human sacrifice, while strictly forbidden in the Torah and denounced by the prophets as an abomination, was a known, if rare and horrific, practice in the ancient Near East. The Moabite king Mesha, in a time of desperation, sacrificed his own son on the city wall to his god Chemosh. Jephthah, a man from the violent, syncretistic frontier, may well have believed that the ultimate vow required the ultimate sacrifice. The raw, tragic power of the story lies in reading it literally. He made a monstrous vow, not fully considering the consequences, in a foolish attempt to guarantee a victory that God was already giving him. The battle itself is almost an anticlimax. Empowered by the Spirit and now bound by his terrible vow, Jephthah falls upon the Ammonites and wins a resounding victory. The text says, "The Lord gave them into his hand." He smashes 20 of their cities in a great slaughter. The Ammonites are subdued. Israel is saved. Jephthah is the hero of the hour. He has fulfilled his side of the bargain with the elders of Gilead. He turns for home, a triumphant victor, to claim his reward as the new head of his people. He returns to his house in Mizpah, his heart no doubt swelling with pride and relief. And it is there, in the moment of his greatest triumph, that the full horror of his vow comes crashing down upon him. The doors of his house open, and the first living thing to emerge is not a dog, not a goat, not a servant. Behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dancing. She is a whirlwind of joyous celebration, welcoming her heroic father home from the war. And the narrator twists the knife with one devastating detail. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. In an instant, the sound of victory turns to the sound of a heartbreaking. The thing he loves most in the world, his only heir, the sole vessel of his future and his legacy, has become the object of his terrible vow. His reaction is one of immediate, theatrical grief. He tears his clothes, the traditional sign of mourning for the dead. His first words are not of love or sorrow for her, but of self-pity and blame for her. "Alas, my daughter," he cries, "you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of my trouble." It's a staggering piece of psychological deflection. She has brought him low. She is the cause of his trouble. He sees himself as the primary victim of the tragedy. He then seals her fate with a declaration of his own rigid, misguided piety. "For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take it back." He is trapped not by God, but by his own foolish words and his own flawed understanding of God. The Torah provided ways out of rash vows, but Jephthah, a man of the frontier, a man of oaths and ironclad deals, sees no exit. For him, a vow is a vow. To break it would be to dishonor himself and provoke the wrath of a God he views as a cosmic loan shark who will come to collect his due, no matter how terrible the cost. The response of his daughter is one of the most poignant and heartbreaking moments in all of Scripture. She displays a dignity and a courage that her father so clearly lacks. She does not scream or beg or protest her fate. She accepts her father's vow as binding. "My father," she says, her voice steady, "you have opened your mouth to the Lord. Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Ammonites." She frames her own death as a necessary consequence of the nation's victory. She sees her sacrifice as part of the price of Israel's salvation. Her piety, unlike her father's, is selfless. She has only one request. It is not for her life, but for her legacy. "Let this thing be done for me," she asks. Leave me alone for 2 months, that I may go up and down on the mountains and weep for my virginity, I and my companions. Her grief is not for the loss of her life, but for the loss of her future. In the culture of ancient Israel, to die childless was a profound tragedy. It meant the end of the family line, the extinguishing of one's name and inheritance. Her request is to mourn the fact that she will never be a wife or a mother. Jephthah, trapped in his own misery, grants her this small reprieve. Go, he says. For 2 months, she and her friends wander the mountains, their cries of grief echoing through the hills of Gilead. Then she returns. She walks back into her father's house and back to her fate. The narrator describes the final horrific act with a sentence of chilling, unadorned simplicity. And he did with her according to his vow that he had made. There are no graphic details. None are needed. The statement is absolute. The burnt offering was paid in full. The narrator then adds, as a final, heartbreaking epitaph, she had never known a man. The story ends not with a celebration of victory, but with the establishment of a ritual of mourning. It became a custom in Israel for the young women to go out for 4 days every year to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. The great victory over the Ammonites is forever memorialized not with a festival, but with a lament. Jephthah's story stands as a brutal monument to the dangers of a distorted faith. He was a man empowered by God's Spirit, yet he acted out of a pagan, transactional worldview. He treated God not as a loving, trustworthy sovereign, but as a fickle, dangerous deity who needed to be bribed and appeased. His vow was an act not of faith, but of profound faithlessness. And the result was the destruction of the one thing he held most dear. He saved Israel, but he destroyed his own house, his own future, his own soul. And the darkness of his character does not end there. Just like with Gideon, Jephthah's moment of national triumph is immediately soured by intertribal conflict. The men of Ephraim, puffed up with their usual arrogance, come to him after the fact with the same complaint they brought to Gideon. Why did you cross over to fight against the Ammonites and did not call us to go with you? They demand. We will burn your house over you with fire. They are furious at being excluded from the glory. But Jephthah is not the smooth diplomat that Gideon was. He is a man of violence and vengeance, and his patience is thin. He responds to their threats with a direct accusation. I called you, and you didn't come. You are nothing but deserters. The argument explodes into a brief, bloody civil war. Jephthah gathers his men of Gilead and attacks the Ephraimites. But the true horror comes after the battle is won. The men of Gilead seize the fords of the Jordan to cut off the Ephraimites' escape. And to identify the fleeing soldiers, they devise a simple, brutal test. When a fugitive would come to the river and ask to cross, they would ask him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, they would issue the challenge. Then say, "Shibboleth." The word means ear of grain or stream. But the Ephraimite dialect had no SH sound. They could not pronounce it correctly. They would say Sibboleth. And that subtle difference in dialect, that inability to form a single sound, was a death sentence. As soon as they mispronounced the word, They were seized and slaughtered right there at the riverbank. The text reports that 42,000 Ephraimites were killed that day. This is Jephthah's final act as judge. He is a man who begins as an outcast, rises to be a national hero, saves his people from a foreign oppressor, and then, in the space of a few short verses, sacrifices his own daughter due to a foolish vow, and massacres tens of thousands of his own countrymen over a point of pride. He is a tragic, terrifying figure, a perfect embodiment of the chaos and moral confusion of the era. He ruled for 6 short years, and when he died, he was buried somewhere in Gilead, leaving behind no heir, no dynasty, only the memory of a terrible victory, an unspeakable sorrow, and a river of fratricidal blood. Jephthah's rule was as brief as it was bloody. He judged for 6 years, a tenure marked by the ghost of his daughter and the slaughter of his countrymen. When he died, he left behind no heir, no hope, only a legacy of grief and division. The narrative of Judges then glides over a series of minor judges, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, who rule for a total of 25 years. Their time is marked by a conspicuous lack of drama. They have large families. They live, they die, they are buried. They are placeholders, a brief, shallow piece that serves only to highlight the depths of the next crisis. For after they are gone, the cycle, relentless and inevitable, grinds on. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. This time, the punishment is not a passing raid or a regional occupation. It is a long, grinding, 40-year subjugation under the heel of a new and formidable enemy, the Philistines. We need to understand who these people were. They were not a local Canaanite kingdom or a band of desert nomads. The Philistines were a people of the sea, part of the great migrations that had disrupted the empires of the late Bronze Age. They had settled on the fertile coastal plain of southern Canaan, establishing a powerful federation of 5 city-states: Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, Gath, and Gaza. They were technologically advanced, possessing the secret of smelting iron, while the Israelites were still largely using bronze. They were militarily organized, politically sophisticated, and culturally distinct. For 40 years, they were the dominant power. This was not a short, sharp oppression that brought Israel to its knees in desperation. This was a chronic condition, a permanent state of vassalage. The 40 years of Philistine rule had become normalized, and in a stark departure from every previous cycle in the book of Judges, this time the people of Israel do not cry out to the Lord. They have adapted. They have acquiesced. They have accepted their servitude as the natural state of things. Their spirit is broken. The silence of Israel is perhaps the most damning indictment of their spiritual state. It is into this oppressive silence that God speaks. But he does not speak to a nation, or a prophet, or a leader. He speaks to an individual, to a single, childless family in the small village of Zorah, in the territory of the tribe of Dan, a tribe that had been squeezed by the Philistine expansion up into the rocky hills. The story of our next judge begins not on a battlefield, but in the quiet grief of a barren woman, the wife of a man named Mano. One day, as she is in the field, a figure appears to her. The text calls him the angel of the Lord. Behold, the angel says, getting straight to the point, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. This is the classic biblical annunciation, the promise of a miraculous birth that signals the coming of a figure of great significance. But this birth comes with a strict set of conditions. The boy's life is to be consecrated to God from the very beginning. The angel gives the woman a set of prenatal instructions. Therefore be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb. This is something new. A Nazirite vow, as laid out in the Book of Numbers, was typically a temporary, voluntary vow taken by an adult to dedicate themselves to God for a specific period. It involved 3 main prohibitions: abstaining from all products of the grapevine, wine, vinegar, even grapes themselves, refraining from cutting one's hair, and avoiding all contact with the dead. It was a vow of separation, of setting oneself apart for a special period of holiness. But this child is to be a Nazirite for life, and the vow is not his choice, but a divine decree imposed upon him before he is even conceived. His entire existence is to be a sign of his separation to God. And the angel reveals his purpose, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Notice the wording. He shall begin to save Israel. His life will not be the final victory, but the start of the resistance, the first crack in the foundation of Philistine dominance. The woman rushes home and tells her husband Mano. Her description of the angelic visitor is filled with awe. A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God, very awesome. Mano's reaction is a mixture of faith and plodding literalism. He prays, not with a burst of praise, but with a request for clarification. O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again to us, and teach us what we are to do for the child who will be born. He believes, but he wants the instructions repeated, confirmed, written down in triplicate. God grants his request. The angel appears again, but once more he appears to the woman when she is alone in the field. She has to run and get her husband. Mano, finally face to face with the divine messenger, asks, "Are you the man who spoke to the woman?" After the angel confirms, Mano asks again for instructions, and the angel patiently repeats the same prohibitions. Then Mano, playing the part of the gracious host, offers to prepare a meal for the visitor. The angel declines, but suggests they prepare a burnt offering to the Lord instead. It is at this point that Mano, still not grasping the nature of his guest, asks his name. "What is your name, so that we may honor you when your words come true?" The angel's reply is mysterious and profound. "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" The Hebrew word for wonderful, Peli, is from the same root as the word for miracle. The angel is essentially saying, "My name is beyond your comprehension. It is miracle itself." Mano prepares the offering of a young goat on a rock, and as the flames leap up from the makeshift altar towards heaven, the angel does a wonderful thing. he ascends in the flame. In that moment of supernatural fire and flight, Mano and his wife finally understand. They fall on their faces in terror. Mano's immediate conclusion is one of pure dread. We shall surely die, for we have seen God. But it is his wife, this unnamed woman, who possesses the true theological insight. She gently rebukes his fear with impeccable logic. If the Lord had meant to kill us, she reasons, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these. She is the quiet, steadfast heart of the story, a woman of deep faith and clear thinking, who understands the character of God better than her husband. In due time, the woman gives birth to a son, and she names him Samson Shimshon, a name related to the Hebrew word for son, Shemesh. The boy grows, and the Lord blesses him, and the narrative gives us a tantalizing hint of the power stirring within him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him at Mahinadan, between Zorah and Eshtal. The stage is set. The miracle child, the consecrated Nazarite, the boy in whom the Spirit of God is beginning to move, is now a young man. The hopes of a nation, even a nation that has not bothered to hope for itself, rest on his shoulders. Samson's first recorded act as an adult, however, is not a heroic strike against the Philistine oppressors. It is an act of adolescent rebellion fueled by lust. He goes down to the Philistine town of Timnah, and there he sees a young Philistine woman. He returns home to his parents and issues a blunt demand. I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now get her for me as my wife. His parents are appalled. Their miracle son, their Nazarite dedicated to the God of Israel, wants to marry one of the enemy, a foreigner, a pagan. This was a violation of their religious and cultural identity. Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives, or among all our people, they plead, that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson is adamant, his response a perfect encapsulation of his character. Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. He is ruled by his appetites, by what he sees, by what he wants. His personal desires trump the law of God, the counsel of his parents, and the cause of his people. Yet, in this moment of Samson's carnal willfulness, the narrator inserts a stunning theological statement. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. This is the central paradox of the Samson story. God is not waiting for Samson to be righteous or holy to use him. God is hijacking Samson's sinful desires, his lust, his anger, his pride, and using them as the very means by which he will begin to disrupt Philistine rule. Samson thinks he is just chasing a girl. God is setting up a cosmic chess match, and Samson's passions are the pawns. So Samson and his parents go down to Timnah to arrange the marriage. On the way, as Samson is walking through the vineyards, a young lion comes roaring toward him, and for the first time, we see his power unleashed. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, the text says, and he tore the lion in pieces with his bare hands, as one might tear a young goat. It is an act of breathtaking, casual strength, and he tells no one about it, not even his parents. It is his secret. Sometime later, he travels the same road again, and he turns aside to look at the carcass of the lion he killed. And inside the skeleton, he finds something bizarre. A swarm of bees has built a hive and filled it with honey. Without a second thought, he scrapes out the honeycomb with his hands, eating it as he walks along. This is Samson's first clear violation of his Nazirite vow. He has deliberately touched a dead body. He even gives some of the honey to his parents, carefully omitting the detail of where he got it from. He is already a man of secrets and compromises. The wedding feast arrives, a 7-day drinking party, as was the custom. Samson, the Nazirite who is forbidden from wine, is hosting a week-long booze-up. At the feast, he decides to entertain his 30 Philistine groomsmen with a riddle, proposing a wager of 30 expensive linen garments and 30 changes of festival clothes. His riddle is based on his secret experience with the lion. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. The Philistines are stumped. For 3 days, they can't figure it out. By the 7th and final day of the feast, their frustration turns to menace. They go to Samson's new wife and issue a brutal ultimatum. Coax your husband to tell us the riddle, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? The young bride, trapped between her new husband and her threatening countrymen, does as they say. She begins to work on Samson, using tears and emotional manipulation as her weapons. She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted, nagging him relentlessly, accusing him of not truly loving her. Finally, on the 7th day, worn down by her constant pressure, Samson gives in. He tells her the answer to the riddle, and she, of course, immediately tells her Philistine kinsmen. Just before the sun sets on the final day, they come to Samson with the answer, phrasing it as a taunting counter-riddle. What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion? Samson knows instantly that he has been betrayed. His reply is bitter and laced with a crude, angry metaphor. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. He has been cheated, and he is furious. And once again, the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon him. But this time it is not the spirit of heroic deliverance, but the spirit of vengeful rage. To pay his gambling debt, he goes down to another Philistine city, Ashkelon, kills 30 random men, takes their clothes, and contemptuously throws them at the men who had solved the riddle. His wedding has ended in a massacre. Consumed by fury, he abandons his new wife and storms back to his father's house. The father-in-law, in a move of panicked damage control, gives the bride to Samson's best man. After some time, Samson's anger cools, and he decides he wants his wife back. He returns to Timnah with a gift of a young goat, only to be blocked at the door by her father, who informs him that she has been given to another man. The father tries to appease the famously volatile strongman by offering him the younger, more beautiful sister instead. But for Samson, this is the ultimate insult. He declares his actions are now justified. This time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. He is about to escalate this personal soap opera into a national economic disaster. His method is as bizarre as it is destructive. He goes out and catches 300 foxes. He then ties them together in pairs, tail to tail, fastens a torch in the knot between each pair of tails, lights the torches, and sets the terrified animals loose. The result is a fleet of panicked, living firebrands that race through the Philistines' fields at the height of the harvest season. They burn everything: the shocks of cut grain, the standing grain waiting to be harvested, the precious, slow-growing vineyards and olive groves. It is an act of stunningly effective agricultural terrorism, a crippling blow to the local economy. The Philistines investigate, discover who was responsible and why, and their retaliation is swift and brutal. They go to Timnah, and they burn Samson's former wife and her father to death, the very thing they had threatened her with to get the answer to the riddle. Their cruelty ironically fulfills their own threat. When Samson hears this, his rage, which had been directed at the Philistines in general, now finds a specific, personal focus. The cycle of revenge takes another vicious turn. Since you have acted like this, he vows, I will surely take my revenge on you, and after that I will quit. He falls on them, and the text says cryptically, struck them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. He then retreats to a cave at a place called the Rock of Edom. The Philistine lords are now finished with this one-man wrecking crew. They raise an army and march into the territory of Judah, demanding Samson. And what follows is one of the most shameful episodes in Israel's history. 3,000 men from the tribe of Judah, Samson's own kinsmen, go up to his cave, not to join him in a rebellion, but to arrest him. Their words to him are a portrait of a people who have completely accepted their own servitude. Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? They whine. What is this that you have done to us? They see Samson not as a deliverer, but as a troublemaker, a dangerous maverick who is upsetting the status quo and endangering their fragile peace. Samson's reply is simple. As they did to me, so I have done to them. But the men of Judah insist. They have come to bind him and hand him over to the Philistines. Samson is utterly alone. He has no army, no allies, not even the support of his own tribe. He agrees to surrender on the one condition that they swear an oath not to kill him themselves. So the deliverer of Israel is bound with 2 new ropes by his own people and led away like a common criminal to be handed over to the enemy. As they approach the Philistine camp at Lehi, the Philistines see him coming and begin to shout in triumph. But their celebration is premature. In that moment of ultimate humiliation, the Spirit of the Lord rushes on Samson for a 3rd time. The 2 new ropes on his arms become like flax that has caught fire, and they melt from his wrists. He is free. He looks around and sees the fresh jawbone of a donkey. It is a crude, unclean weapon. Touching it is another violation of his Nazirite vow, but it is all he needs. He picks it up and wades into the Philistine soldiers. The text says he killed 1,000 men with it. When the slaughter is over, Samson stands alone amidst the carnage, and he commemorates his victory with a boastful, punning poem. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have made donkeys of them. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have struck down 1,000 men. A pun in Hebrew on donkey and heaps. But immediately after this moment of supreme triumph, he is overcome by his own human frailty. He is on the verge of dying from thirst. And for the first time in the entire narrative, in his moment of desperate personal need, Samson cries out to the Lord. It is not a prayer of piety or repentance, but a raw complaint. You have granted this great salvation by the hand of your servant, and shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? And God, in his grace, answers. He splits open a hollow place in the rock at Lehi, and a spring of water gushes out. Samson drinks, and his spirit revives. The place is named En-Hakkore, the spring of him who cried out. It is a small moment of grace in a life filled with violence, a reminder that even this deeply flawed champion is still, somehow, God's servant. Samson's escapades continue, always driven by his unrestrained appetites. He goes to the Philistine capital city of Gaza and spends the night with a prostitute. The men of Gaza hear he is there and set a trap, surrounding the house and waiting by the city gate to ambush him at dawn. But Samson doesn't wait for morning. Around midnight, he gets up, walks to the city gate, and proceeds to perform one of the most spectacular feats of strength and mockery in his career. He grabs hold of the massive double doors of the city gate, along with the 2 posts and the locking bar, rips the entire structure out of the ground, heaves it onto his shoulders, and carries it for miles up to the top of a hill that is near Hebron. Hebron was a major city deep in the heart of the tribe of Judah. This act was not just a display of power. It was an act of monumental humiliation, symbolically castrating the city of Gaza, leaving it open and defenseless, and depositing its gates as a trophy in the heart of Israelite territory. But Samson's hubris and his addiction to Philistine women will be his downfall. The narrator tells us, after this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The verb is significant. With the woman of Timnah, he saw her. With the prostitute in Gaza, he just went into her. But Delilah, he loved. This is a deeper, more dangerous entanglement. And the lords of the Philistines see it as their golden opportunity. They come to Delilah, not with threats, but with an offer of unimaginable wealth. Each of the 5 lords promises her 1,100 pieces of silver, a total of 5,500 shekels, a king's ransom, if she can accomplish one thing: coax him and see in what his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. So begins a tragic and manipulative game. Delilah, motivated by greed, becomes the instrument of his destruction. 3 times she asks him for the secret of his strength, and 3 times he plays along, feeding her a lie. First, he tells her that if he is bound with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, he will become as weak as any other man. She gets the bowstrings from the Philistine lords, ties him up while he sleeps, and then cries the alarm. The Philistines are upon you, Samson. He wakes up and snaps the bowstrings as a string of tow snaps when it touches the fire. The lie is exposed. Delilah pouts, accusing him of mocking her. She presses him again. He offers a second lie. Bind me with new ropes that have never been used. She does so. The alarm is sounded, and he snaps the ropes from his arms like a thread. Her frustration grows. She accuses him again of lying. He offers a third, more elaborate, and seemingly more plausible lie, one that touches tantalizingly close to the truth about his hair. If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web of a loom, he tells her. She meticulously weaves his long hair into the fabric on her loom, fastening it with a pin, making him literally tied to her domestic world. For a third time, she cries, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." He wakes up and rips the entire loom, pin and web and all, out of its moorings, and walks away with it in his hair. At this point, Delilah abandons all subtlety and turns to pure emotional blackmail. "How can you say, 'I love you,' when your heart is not with me?" she demands. "You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies." The narrator then describes a relentless campaign of psychological pressure. And she pressed him hard with her words day after day, and urged him so that his soul was vexed to death. This is the same weapon his first wife used against him with the riddle. Faced with the ceaseless emotional torment of a woman he loves, the strongest man in the world breaks. He tells her everything. He pours out the sacred secret of his birth, the core of his identity. "A razor has never come upon my head," he confesses, "for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." He reveals that his strength is not an inherent magical quality, but a sign of his consecration to God, a consecration symbolized by his uncut hair. To cut the hair is to break the vow, to sever the connection to the source of his power. Delilah knows, with a chilling certainty, that this time he has told her the truth. She sends word to the Philistine lords, "Come up this once, for he has told me all his heart." They come, the silver bribe clutched in their hands. She then works her final betrayal. She lulls Samson to sleep, his head resting in her lap, a picture of false intimacy and utter vulnerability. She calls in a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. As the razor does its work, his strength begins to leave him. Delilah then cries the alarm for the final time. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." Wakens from his sleep, his mind still clouded. He thinks it is just another game. "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free," he says to himself. But the narrator delivers one of the most devastating lines in all of Scripture. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. He had broken the final symbol of his vow. He had treated his sacred calling so cheaply, so carelessly, that he didn't even notice when the divine presence, the source of all his power, had departed. He was an empty vessel. The Philistines seize him, and this time there is no escape. They inflict upon him a terrible, symbolic punishment. They gouge out his eyes, robbing the man who was always ruled by what he saw of his sight. They bind him with bronze fetters and take him down to Gaza, the city he had once so profoundly humiliated. And there they put him in prison and force him to grind at the mill. The mighty hero, the champion of Israel, is now a blind, shorn, powerless slave, endlessly turning a heavy millstone, performing the work of a beast of burden or a lowly female servant. It is a fall of epic and absolute proportions. Some time passes. The Philistines, convinced their enemy is broken forever, decide to hold a great festival to celebrate. They gather in the temple of their chief god, Dagon, to offer sacrifices and praise him for their victory. Our God has delivered into our hands Samson, our enemy, they chant. The temple is packed with people, and the 5 lords of the Philistines are there. The narrator notes that there were about 3,000 men and women on the roof alone, watching the festivities. At the height of their revelry, someone calls out, "Bring out Samson, that he may entertain us." So they lead the blind giant out of the prison and into the temple, where he is mocked and displayed as a trophy of Dagon's power. And in the midst of this final humiliation, the narrator drops a quiet, crucial detail. Now the hair of his head had begun to grow again after it had been shaved. The outward sign of his vow was slowly returning. Samson asks the young boy who is leading him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them." The boy guides him to the 2 central, load-bearing pillars that support the entire structure. And there, standing between the pillars, his hands placed upon them, the blind Samson prays his last prayer. It is not a prayer for forgiveness or salvation. It is a raw, desperate plea for one final act of vengeance. "O Lord God," he cries, "please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." His motivation is still deeply personal, but for the first time, he fully acknowledges God as the source of his strength. He places his right hand on one pillar and his left hand on the other. He takes a deep breath and shouts his final, terrible war cry, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushes with all his might. The spirit of the Lord, which had departed from him in Delilah's lap, returns for one last, cataclysmic moment. The pillars groan and then shatter. The massive roof of the temple collapses, bringing tons of stone and timber down upon the celebrating crowd. The lords, the priests, the people on the roof, the crowds on the floor, they are all crushed in an instant. The narrator concludes the epic with a final, stunning tally. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. In the end, his family comes down from the hills of Dan to claim his body from the ruins. They carry him home and bury him in the tomb of his father, Mano. His life was a whirlwind of contradictions. He was a man set apart for God who lived entirely for himself, a Nazirite who broke every tenet of his vow, a judge who never led an army, never issued a ruling, and never united the people. His battles were driven by lust, rage, and pride. He was betrayed by every woman he pursued, and by his own countrymen. And yet, through this chaotic, passionate, and deeply flawed life, God began the work of saving Israel. Samson's final, suicidal act of vengeance dealt a devastating blow to the Philistine leadership, creating a power vacuum that would later be exploited by Samuel and David. He was a tragic hero, a riddle of a man, a testament to a God who can wield even the most broken and rebellious of tools to achieve his sovereign ends. The life of Samson was a force of nature, a whirlwind of personal passion and divine power that left a trail of chaos in its wake. His was an epic, a mythological tragedy of a man who was a living paradox, consecrated yet carnal, a deliverer who was a slave to his own appetites. His suicidal victory in the Temple of Dagon was a devastating blow to the Philistine leadership, but it was not a national salvation. It was the last, explosive act of a one-man show. And with his death, the curtain falls on the era of the great, spirit-filled, charismatic judges who rose to fight foreign foes. The book of Judges now takes a sharp, dark turn. The final 5 chapters are a kind of appendix, a collection of stories that serve as the book's horrifying climax. The lens shifts from the external threat of oppressors to the internal cancer of Israel's own corruption. There are no more foreign armies to fight, no more divinely appointed heroes to rally the troops. There is only Israel, left to its own devices, and the result is a descent into an anarchy so profound, so morally bankrupt, that it makes the earlier stories of oppression seem almost orderly by comparison. The narrator prefaces this section with the key that unlocks its meaning, a phrase that will be repeated like a funeral dirge. In those days, there was no king in Israel. This is not a neutral historical observation. It is a damning theological diagnosis. In the absence of a righteous, central authority, a king who would enforce the covenant law of the ultimate king, Yahweh, a vacuum is created. And into that vacuum rushes the full, terrifying force of human depravity. The final verdict on the era is delivered in the second half of that refrain. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This is the story of a nation devouring itself from the inside out. Our journey into this abyss begins not with a war or a famine, but in the seemingly ordinary home of a man named Micah, who lived in the hill country of Ephraim. The story opens with a family dispute over money. Micah confesses to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke of in my hearing. Behold, the silver is with me, I took it. 1,100 pieces of silver, the exact same amount one of the Philistine lords had promised Delilah for her betrayal of Samson. It was a fortune." His mother's immediate reaction upon hearing his confession is a perfect snapshot of the era's diseased spirituality. She had previously placed a curse on the thief, but now that the thief is revealed to be her own son, she reverses it with a blessing. "Blessed be my son by the Lord." Then she announces her plan for the returned money. "I dedicate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son. to make a carved image and a metal image. Let that sink in. In the same breath, she invokes the name of Yahweh, the God whose second commandment explicitly forbids the creation of carved images, and dedicates the money to making one. This is not paganism. This is something worse. It is a twisted, syncretistic, self-serving religion where the name of the true God is used as a rubber stamp on the most blatant idolatry. She gives 200 pieces of the silver to a silversmith who fashions it into an idol. Micah, her son, takes this idol and places it in a shrine he has built in his house. But he doesn't stop there. He makes an ephod, a priestly garment, and teraphim, a kind of household god or oracle. He has created his own personalized, idolatrous cult. All he needs now is a priest, so he consecrates one of his own sons to fill the role. In Micah's world, worship is a do-it-yourself project. There is no need for a central sanctuary, no need for the laws of Moses. If you want a god, you make one. If you need a priest, you appoint one. He has customized his faith to suit his own preferences, creating a comfortable, convenient religion of the self. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Into this bizarre, domestic cult wanders a young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah. The Levites were the tribe set apart for priestly service, but they had not been given their own tribal territory. They were meant to live in designated cities among the other tribes and serve at the central sanctuary. This young man, however, is a freelance cleric, a homeless priest looking for employment. Micah sees his arrival as a stroke of divine luck. He offers the Levite a job. "Stay with me and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year and a suit of clothes and your living." The Levite, whose sacred calling has been reduced to a mere career choice, readily agrees. Micah is ecstatic. His reasoning reveals the superstitious core of his faith. Now I know that the Lord will prosper me because I have a Levite as priest. He believes he has leveled up his religious game by hearing a legitimate, professional clergyman, an authentic Levite. He has somehow sanctified his idolatrous setup. He thinks he can manipulate God into blessing him by checking the right boxes, that having the proper ritual functionary will guarantee prosperity, regardless of the profound corruption at the heart of his worship. The story then pans out, connecting Micah's private apostasy to a larger tribal crisis. The tribe of Dan, Samson's tribe, is in trouble. They had been allotted fertile land on the coastal plain, but they had failed to drive out the Philistines and the Amorites. Now, squeezed into the hill country, they are seeking new territory. They send 5 spies to scout for land in the north. By chance, these 5 spies come to Micah's house. There, they recognize the young Levite, perhaps by his southern accent. They ask him what he's doing there, and he explains his cushy employment situation. The spies, men of their age, see a priest as a useful tool. "Inquire of God for us," they ask, "whether the journey on which we are going will be successful." The Levite, using Micah's idolatrous paraphernalia, consults his manufactured God and gives them the answer they want to hear. "Go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord." The spies continue north and find the perfect target, a city called Laish. The people of Laish are living quiet, peaceful, and unsuspecting lives. They are isolated with no allies, and their land is fertile. They are, in the spies' assessment, an easy conquest. The spies return to their tribe with a glowing report, and the Danites mobilize for war, sending out a force of 600 armed men, not just as a raiding party, but as a migration, with their families and livestock in tow. On their way north, they pass through the hill country of Ephraim, and they make a stop at Micah's house. But this is not a social call. The 5 former spies lead the way into the shrine, and without a word, steal everything: the carved image, the ephod, the teraphim, the metal image. The Levite priest comes out and asks, "What are you doing?" Their answer is a masterful piece of temptation, an offer to trade up. "Keep quiet, put your hand on your mouth, and come with us and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be a priest to a tribe and a clan in Israel?" The Levite's decision is instantaneous. The text says, "The priest's heart was glad." With no hesitation, no sense of loyalty to the man who took him in, and certainly no sense of loyalty to the true God, he takes the cult objects and happily joins the armed thieves. He sees it as a promotion. Micah, discovering he has been robbed of both his priest and his gods, gathers his neighbors and gives chase. He catches up to the Danites, and the confrontation that follows is both pathetic and profoundly tragic. The Danites turn on him with the arrogance of armed bullies. "What is the matter with you, that you have gathered a company?" they sneer. Micah's reply is one of the saddest sentences in the entire book. It is the cry of a man whose entire spiritual world has just been stolen from him. "You have taken away my gods that I made," he wails, "and the priest, and you have gone away, and what have I left?" His man-made religion, so convenient and comfortable, has proven to be utterly powerless. His gods couldn't even protect themselves from a band of thieves. Faced with the Danites' threats to kill him, he turns around and goes home, a defeated man with an empty shrine. The Danites proceed to Laish. They fall upon the quiet, unsuspecting city, slaughter its inhabitants, and burn it to the ground. They rebuild it, rename it Dan, and settle there. And in their new city, they set up Micah's stolen idol. They install the mercenary Levite as their priest, and the narrator adds a shocking historical footnote, a piece of genealogical information that lands like a punch to the gut. The Levite's name was Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses. The grandson of the great lawgiver himself has become the first priest of a new, institutionalized idolatry in Israel, a cultic center that would continue to pollute the northern kingdom for centuries. The story of Micah is a perfect microcosm of the book's theme. It starts with apostasy in one family, which then infects a wandering priest, which is then violently co-opted by an entire tribe to sanction theft and slaughter, ultimately establishing a permanent national schism. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes, and the result was the corruption of the nation's soul. If the story of Micah and the Danites shows the depths of Israel's religious decay, the final story of the book, that of the Levite and his concubine, plunges us into the abyss of its moral collapse. It is, without question, one of the most disturbing and horrifying narratives in the entire Bible. The story begins, once again, with the ominous refrain. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, we are introduced to another Levite, this one living in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim. He has a concubine, a secondary wife, from the town of Bethlehem in Judah. The relationship sours. The text says she was unfaithful to him, or in another textual tradition, that she became angry with him. She leaves him and returns to her father's house in Bethlehem. After 4 months, the Levite decides to go after her, to speak kindly to her and bring her back. He travels to Bethlehem and is warmly received by her father. The father-in-law's hospitality, however, is excessive, almost suffocating. He insists the Levite stay for a meal, then for the night. 1 day turns into 3, then 4, then 5. The father repeatedly urges him, "Strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and after that you may go." This strange, persistent delay, while seemingly kind, has a fatal consequence. It forces the Levite, his concubine, and his servant to begin their journey home very late on the 5th day. As dusk begins to fall, they find themselves near the city of Jebus, which would later become Jerusalem. The servant, seeing the fading light, makes a sensible suggestion. "Come, let us turn aside to this city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." But the Levite refuses. His reasoning is a terrible and fatal irony, a misplaced expression of religious and national purity. "We will not turn aside into the city of foreigners," he declares, "who do not belong to the people of Israel, but we will pass on to Jibah." Jibah was a city in the tribe of Benjamin. It was an Israelite city. He believed he would be safer among his own kinsmen than among foreigners. He could not have been more wrong. They arrive in Jibah after dark and sit down in the public square. But no one from the city offers them the hospitality that was a sacred duty in the ancient world. They are ignored, left to spend the night in the open. Finally, an old man, who himself is not a Benjamite, but an Ephraimite just living there, sees them and takes pity on them, offering them lodging in his house. But as soon as they have washed their feet and eaten, their refuge is shattered. The men of the city, described as worthless fellows, surround the house and begin beating on the door. Their demand, screamed into the night, is a horrifying echo of the sin of Sodom. "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him." They want to gang rape the male guest. The old host, in a moment of shocking moral calculus, goes out and pleads with the mob. But his proposed solution is even more depraved than their demand. He offers to sacrifice the women of his household to protect the man. "Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine," he says. "Let me bring them out now. Ravish them and do with them what seems good to you. But against this man do not do this outrageous thing. The value of a man's honor in his eyes is worth more than the lives and bodies of his own daughter and his female guest." The mob, however, is not interested. They want the man. At this point, the Levite, the man who had traveled all this way to win back his concubine, commits the ultimate act of cowardly self-preservation. The text says he seized his concubine and pushed her out to them. He sacrifices her to save himself. The mob descends on her, and they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. The woman, brutalized and broken, drags herself back to the house where her master was. She collapses at the door, her hands on the threshold, and there she dies. The next morning, the Levite rises to continue his journey. He opens the door and finds her lying there. His first words to her are not of compassion or horror, but a callous, businesslike command. Get up and let us be going. There is no answer. He places her body on his donkey and continues his journey home, as if she were a piece of luggage. When he arrives at his house, he performs an act of calculated, grotesque horror that is designed to shock the entire nation out of its apathy. He takes a knife and he dismembers his concubine's body into 12 pieces. He then sends one piece to each of the 12 territories of Israel. It is a terrifying, visceral message, a gruesome summons that bypasses words and communicates the depth of the atrocity through an act of unspeakable defilement. The message is clear. An outrage has been committed in Israel that pollutes the entire land, and it demands a national response. The severed body parts do their work. A wave of horror sweeps through the tribes. Such a thing has never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day, the people exclaim. The nation is roused. 400,000 armed men from all the tribes of Israel, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, gather as one man at Mizpah. The Levite stands before the assembly and recounts the story of what happened in Jibah. Tellingly, he edits his testimony to erase his own culpability. He claims the men of Jibah intended to kill him and that they raped his concubine. He omits the crucial detail that he was the one who pushed her out the door. The united tribes, filled with righteous fury, resolve to act. They first send a delegation to the tribe of Benjamin, demanding that they hand over the guilty men from Jibah to be executed, that we may purge the evil from Israel. But the tribe of Benjamin refuses. In a fatal act of tribal solidarity that overrides all sense of justice, they choose to protect their own rapists and murderers. They muster their own army to go to war against their brother tribes. The stage is set for a catastrophic civil war. What follows is a bloody and tragic conflict. The 11 tribes, despite having a massive numerical advantage, and presumably God on their side, are shockingly defeated in the first day of battle, losing 22,000 men. They weep before the Lord and ask if they should continue. God tells them to go up again. On the second day, they are defeated again, losing another 18,000 men. The nation is devastated. It seems that even in their righteous anger, their own sinfulness has made them vulnerable. Finally, after a day of fasting, weeping, and offering sacrifices, they inquire of the Lord a third time, and this time God gives them the promise of victory. Go up, for tomorrow I will give them into your hand. On the third day, Using an ambush strategy, the Israelite army finally crushes the Benjamites. The victory quickly devolves into a genocidal rampage. The Israelite soldiers sweep through the territory of Benjamin, slaughtering everyone they can find, men, women, and children, and burning their cities to the ground. The entire tribe is exterminated, all except for 600 Benjamite soldiers who manage to escape and hide out at the rock of Rimmon. The smoke clears, and the Israelites' rage turns to horrified grief. They gather at Bethel and weep, "O Lord, God of Israel, why has this happened in Israel, that today there should be one tribe lacking in Israel?" In their zeal to purge evil, they have nearly annihilated one of the 12 tribes of their own family. This creates a new, self-inflicted crisis. In their initial assembly, they had all sworn a solemn oath, saying, "Cursed be the man who gives a wife to Benjamin." Now the 600 male survivors have no way to marry and rebuild the tribe. Their rash oath threatens to make the extinction of Benjamin permanent. The rest of the book details the twisted, morally bankrupt solutions the elders devise to get around their own oath without technically breaking it. First, they realize that the city of Jabesh-Gilead had sent no soldiers to the assembly at Mizpah. They decide this dereliction of duty is punishable by death. So they send 12,000 soldiers to Jabesh-Gilead with a chilling command: "Go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead with the edge of the sword, also the women and the little ones. You shall devote them to complete destruction, except that you shall save alive every woman who has not known man by lying with him." They massacre an entire Israelite city in order to procure wives for Benjamin. They find 400 young virgins, whom they kidnap and give to the Benjamite survivors. But this is not enough. There are still 200 Benjamite men without wives. So the elders devise a second, even more perverse plan. They tell the remaining Benjamites to go and hide in the vineyards near Shiloh, where an annual religious festival to the Lord is held. "And watch," the elders instruct, "and when the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards, and snatch each man his wife from the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin." It is a plan for mass, ritualized kidnapping, sanctioned by the leaders of Israel as a solution to their problem. They even provide a prescripted excuse for the fathers and brothers of the abducted girls, a piece of legalistic casuistry that allows them to claim they didn't break their oath. You did not give them to them, so you will not be guilty. The plan is carried out. The Benjamites abduct their brides from the middle of a religious festival. The book ends with this horrifying image of state-sanctioned rape and kidnapping, and with the tribe of Benjamin returning to their land to rebuild. The final sentence of the book of Judges lands like a hammer blow, the ultimate summary of the moral and spiritual chaos we have just witnessed. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This is where the story ends. Not with a hero, not with a victory, but with a nation in ruins, having become more monstrous than the enemies it once fought. The book that began with Israel's failure to be faithful to God's covenant ends with Israel's complete descent into a depravity that rivals that of the Canaanite nations they were supposed to displace. The journey from Ehud's assassination to the dismemberment of the concubine is a long, downward spiral. It is a stark and terrifying portrait of a society without a moral compass, without righteous leadership, adrift in a sea of violence and apostasy. The entire book becomes a powerful, desperate argument for the necessity of a king, not just any king like the bloody Abimelech, but a righteous king who would follow the true king, Yahweh, and lead the people out of the darkness they had created for themselves. The story of Judges is a horrifying but necessary prelude, setting the stage for the hope that would eventually emerge with Samuel, and with the flawed but fateful monarchy of Saul and David. It is a cautionary tale for all time, a brutal reminder of the abyss that waits when a people forsake their God and decide to do only what is right in their own